Well, hi everyone, and welcome to episode 114, 114 episodes. I can't believe I've done that. And there's a guy who has been on every season but the last season. He kind of blew me off last season. He's busy. He's a professor now. He's got a lot of stuff going on. Uh, and of course, he obviously knows I'm joking. If not, he lives down the street. So if you see him disappear from the screen, he's coming after me. But Jay, you've been on the most of anyone on my show, so you're still going to be up there. So J Ball, welcome to the
Thank you.
show.
Yeah, living down the street from you, I can't even hide my car from you.
You try a lot, though. I had noticed. And then we've got Brian Harkins, and Brian is someone who was on the show last year, and we talked about firefighters. And Brian was such an entertaining, and I just got engaged to everything he was saying. And of all people, it was Jay Ball who recommended you coming on. And I'm like, hey, this is the perfect combo. So, Brian, welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy a second time.
Thanks for having me back. Appreciate it.
You know, I need to put it out there. Maybe you guys know, obviously, but for me, the first responders' health, mental health, particularly, is something that is dear to my heart. And it's not something that I take lightly. And I think that what we tend to forget is I'm going to always do at least one episode about first responders every season until you guys say stop. But even if you say stop, I'll keep on doing it because we don't recognize some of the stressors that are very unique to first responders. And I'm talking a lot here, but I just want to make sure everyone knows listening. And you guys obviously knew that, but we just need to continue talking about it. That's why I'm never going to get tired of talking about it. But speaking of a guy who talks a lot, that's me. Now your turn for you guys to talk about. Brian, how about you introduce yourself to the audience who may not have catched your episode yet?
So, my name is Brian Harkins. I am a Stoughton firefighter paramedic. I've been in emergency medical services for 32 years. I started off in the Army, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, which is where my first little traumatic incident happened, and it just kind of snowballed from there. Dabbled with the Department of Corrections for 5 years prior to getting on the fire department. And after my mental health breakdown in 2015, I've been on the other side of the fence trying to assist people so that they don't follow my path and fall into the same problems that I had.
Well, welcome,
That's the short
Brian.
version. Thanks for having me.
Um, Jay, how about you introduce yourself for what, the eighth time now?
How we doing? Yeah, J Ball, Sergeant with the Framingham Police Department, and obvious Framingham, Mass. United States Army veteran with some deployments, and currently I'm also teaching at a psychology college in Massachusetts.
Well, welcome, Jay. And I was at a conference last week, I think, but by this time it's going to be months ago. And it was great to see Jay in action as a teacher, professor, whatever the hell we're supposed to call it. And was just very interesting to see him. And, it was nice to have, I've been to a lot of these. It's a actual conference for mental health and first responders. Tends to be a lot more police officers than anything else. But, I've seen it grow exponentially every single year. This year, that auditorium was pretty full, and that was really, really good. But I guess my first question that I want to throw out to both of you, because it's something that I still find that there's some resistance from first responders in regards to mental health. I know that we've talked about this multiple times, but for me, until we break that wall, we're going to keep on talking about it. So why is it still a barrier for some to reach out for help for mental health at this point in time? I mean, 2023, we should get it by now.
You want to take that one step? All right. I'll speak on our side, and I don't want to be police versus fire, but I can say from my experience in policing, I think I've said it before, is culture, number one, and two, leadership. I know at our place, from the top down, if someone needs help, there's no questions asked almost. And I'm not throwing the chief and the deputies under the bus, but if someone's having a struggle, or if someone is needs some help, or something comes down the line, the deputies and the chiefs know who to reach out to. They know who's close. We have got 140 something people right now on our job, but they know exactly who's close with each other. And hey, Jay, if it gets to this level, let me know. but this person's struggling. And I think that leadership from the top goes down to the shift level and the division level with detectives and all that. And I think everyone in those positions, there's at least one person, if not everyone, on the shift level and detectives and the other special units that buy in to mental health. So at our place, we're not perfect, but I think it's our culture and from the top. But there's other places that I think, and I'm not picking on smaller towns. I mean, it could happen in large cities too, but I think that stigma involved where they're going to take my firearm. They're going to not let me go out on the road. Well, that may happen if certain circumstances. But how about if it's just you need to talk to someone? Are you worried what the guy next to you or the girl next to you thinks? So I think that stigma happens in a lot of police departments. I know in class yesterday we do a veterans suicidality class with firearms at the college, and the question was posed: well, how do I tell someone it's safe to go talk to someone because they think they're going to lose their firearm? And I kind of posed it this way: let's talk about veterans. There'd be about 50% of your department's veterans would just leave tomorrow if someone said they were depressed, had anxiety, a mixture of the both, PTSD. You'd lose them. And it doesn't mean that person's not effective in their job, whether it be a first responder or anything. So I think it's belief from the top down, and sometimes it has to come from maybe the bottom, maybe the middle, encouraging the leaders in a police department to open their minds to people need help.
Okay. What about you, Brian? What do you think?
So I think for us, the easier side, because we don't lose a firearm, we don't lose that part of the job. So we have it a little bit easier on our side of the fence in all fairness, for the Team Blue. But I am fortunate to work for a department that actually cares. And I reached out to you today. I know this won't air for a while, but somebody was in crisis, and the department is at least making the effort. I just happen to have a few more resources. I've been at it a little bit longer, but the intention and support was 100% there. They're just not as into the system as I am. So we were able to reach out, excuse me, and get that connection set up. So it's all good. I come in when I'm having a bad day or something happens. I tell the young guys at roll call, like, enough's enough. Don't be me, because you're going to be me someday if you're not careful. And slowly but surely, when one of the young kids made a comment like mental health is important, I grabbed him a little while in. I'm like, you like busting my balls, or are you serious? He go, no, I'm serious. I'm like, we're getting through. So we're working on it. We're getting there. And there are police officers that are on my peer support group that comes in, and who the chief was like, you never dealt with this. I don't want to deal with it. Like, go away. And through some phone calls, some connections, and they were able to get some help. But I think as we keep beating that drum, as long as guys like Jay and myself just keep, listen, it's okay. We all have issues, and keep beating it down. And Travis Howes just spoke at the PFFM convention this week. I was going to try to make it to that thing you guys had this past week, but we had our own convention. If you don't know Travis Howes, he was a former police officer, became a firefighter, was part of the Charleston 9 firefighters that were killed years ago. And he gave a great talk, and people came out kind of shaking their heads. And he's talking again in July, which would be good. As long as people like him, he gets up, he's very engaging, he tells a story, and people came out. Instead of like, what the heck is this? I don't need this crap. People were actually engaged and actually wanting to meet him and talk to him, and bought his book. And slowly but surely the word's getting out there. And we need people like that, leading from the front. And they are there. Mike Segru from the police side of things, he's doing a great job on the police side. We're getting there. We just have to keep beating that drum. And like Jay mentioned a little bit about small town police, the person that put us in touch with each other when I first met Jay, dispatching a small town. Well, you can sit there and say, listen, I'm big city, shut up. But Jay's big city, shut up. You're not us. But yet when this person's dispatching calls, they know them. You know what I mean? I don't know the people I go to, the gun shops. I don't know them. She's bumping into the families at the store, the grocery store, this and that. And that's a whole different level. And we need to stop trying to one-up each other and start to sit there and say, your problems are your problems. However you got there, they're yours. Let's fix it. And that's a big change in my own education and getting more experience at doing this. So a lot of things happened today that made me very proud to be part of what we're doing. And so many phone calls went out, and so many connections were made. And I got more people looking to jump on to helping out. So it's happening. It's working now that people are seeing it actually working. So It's a long-winded story, but like I said, sometimes I get excited about this stuff. So especially when we have successes like we had today.
Well, I get excited too, actually. And so please continue to be excited because that's the only way we're going to get through. Because one of the ways, and again, you guys, I want to hear a little bit about what you think, but one of the things I had a firefighter recently come in struggling, and like I'm not like the other guys, and the other guys don't have my issues, blah, blah, blah. And I said to him, I said, if someone has a physical health issue in your department, whatever it is, I don't want to even say it because you never want to wish it on anyone. It's the great equalizer, right? Because everyone's going to be there for them, but whatever injury, whatever they have, you're going to be there for them. Why is mental health not the same equalizer? Because I mean, I look at you guys, you're already on, you bought into the system, so to speak. But how do we convince people that you said leadership? But I also think that on a other level, it's people seeing that mental health is as important as physical health. And I don't know who wants to go first, but that's just my view.
I'll defer to Jay first. He's been here longer than me, so.
I don't know. That's one thing I always say. I always will say mental health first aid. We'll use that class. When I first started teaching it was if I drop a heart attack right now, and I've said it on this show before, and I don't want to keep beating that, saying the same thing. But if I drop a heart attack right now, everyone knows what to do. We're gonna get the AED. We're gonna call fire department, EMS. We'll get them here. Okay, well, what's the difference? And I've noticed with younger guys, and I don't think it's across the board, but even in service, I've been teaching in service, and I'm lucky. I did it through we had about 7 or 8 smaller PDs this year. And there's mental health in service in Massachusetts for police every year. I'm not sure, Brian, they do it. How's in service for fire departments done? Not to get off track.
So we don't do it in service. We just do Con Ed for our paramedic stuff, but that's it. We don't do what you guys do, the sexual harassment. If anything, some departments just mandated online. So it's completely different from what you guys do.
Okay. So we had 2 classes this year. And we usually have something to do with mental health every year. And I wanted to do this with the 7 to 8, geez, maybe even 9 departments are all small departments, guys I knew from my previous department. And it was good because you sit there and it's sad because now I get annoyed watching people. They're either not paying attention or whatnot, but some of those same people afterwards, I think they're so worried they'll come up after class and they'll start, Jay, just so you know, where can I get help? Or Jay, just so you know, hey, I went to the on-site academy. Hey, Jay, just so you know. And I'm like, oh, wow. And that's something that never would have been said years ago. I'm not sure if I directly answered your question, but it was kind of like in my head thinking about how people it's changed because no one would have ever come up to me. I don't know, 5 years ago, 10, let's say 10 years ago, and never said that. Hey, Jay, I went to the on-site academy. You're right. It's the best thing I ever did. Jay, I went here. I just think the buy-in's better, and I'm glad we're doing mental health every year. Some people, when they see me coming, they're like, oh, well, it's either about narcotics or it's about mental health. I'm like, oh, it's about mental health this year. Like I said, the receding hairline and the grays that are somewhere, I go, that's the old life with narcotics, I said. So I don't know. That's kind of like what I wanted to say to that part. So I don't know what you got, Brian.
So I think the stigma, and it came up this past week as well of I feel weak by saying something and to try to get that through. But I find the other problem is people don't know what to do when somebody comes up and says, I'm suicidal. Or when the phone call I got this morning was literally, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. And it's hard to have that adult conversation to say, are you going to kill yourself? Because people still think, well, I'll put the idea in their head. And we have to get to the point. And a lot of it is, I'm not very good at a lot of things in life, but I'm good at kind of breaking down these walls and getting people to open up a little bit when they don't want to. I think I've just from talking to people for 32 years, I'm good at just kind of knowing their strengths and weaknesses. And I know that person I can pounce on, and I know that person I just kind of tiptoe around. So I think as long as we I think we just need to keep listening. And I think when people reach out and we have those resources available, like the person that called today was like, I can't, like in 48 hours, you already have an appointment booked for this person. And I'm like, yeah, because I go deep. I talk to people. I'll text people. I'll ask questions. I make myself available 24/7. I can't promise I can fix everything, but I certainly can point people in the right direction. And you don't have to always be the the hero with the cape to save the day, but at least if you know where to refer people. If I get a cop, I might be like, I don't know. I'll call Jay, and if Jay gets a firefighter, he's like, I don't know how to call me. Like, I'll be available. We'll take the call if it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't care. But that's what we're doing. And slowly but surely, we're getting more buy-in. So I just got a huge buy-in from somebody today who's pretty well known and respected in certain areas, and is like, I'm in. Whatever you need, tell me what I can do. I'll do whatever we need to do. So as long as things like that keep happening and people keep seeing the success, it's just going to keep growing as long as we keep having successes.
One thing, Steve, also go off what Brian said. You don't need to. It's almost a challenge to people in police departments and fire departments, EMS. I hope there's more than one person, but be the one person in your department that when you're having a conversation with someone, it doesn't need to start out. We had an officer, and I know this is going to air down the line, so I'm not throwing anything out there, but we had an officer just lost his mom in pretty circumstances that I know I don't want to be in where he was at the time. And it's almost, when you get the call from me, it's almost like, hey, what's up? I'm not the most therapeutic person in the world either, Steve knows. But usually when you get the call from me, the text from me, hey, dude, you doing all right? The first 5 minutes, we dance around and we talk stuff. And then all of a sudden, and hey, and this isn't specific to this person, but usually you'll get something back with, hey, I may need to talk to someone, or hey, you know what, I was thinking about this the other day, or hey, be that person that, you don't have to start that conversation out, with, hey, you should go talk to someone, but it always dances around with another officer that's retiring. A big part of his identity is being a police officer. The conversation after the first 10 minutes of him and I talking was, I'm not going to be a police officer anymore. I'm retiring. And be that person in the department. Hopefully there's 15 of them, but the big thing is confidentiality. We're talking about, breaking an arm. There's guys that come into me like, oh, my gout's killing me, Jay. God, I got to do a detail today. All right. Or easy, we'll joke about the gout, or we'll go get help for that, but we won't help ourselves when there's other things going on. When, okay, yeah, you can't walk because of the gout, but 2 days ago, you were just at, and I'll use a fire scenario, you were just at a deadly fire, where but you won't go talk to someone about that even as a police officer, and I've said it before, the first thing I used to do when I investigated fires, I would show up on scene, and I would meet up with the deputy chief or the chief and the counterpart, and the first thing I would say was, are all the firefighters all right? And I learned that question was good because they were physically maybe all right, nothing collapsed, they were pulled out of the fire, but if it's a fatal, I wasn't thinking of, okay, well, 2 weeks down the line, 2 hours down the line, asking if they were all right at that time was caring of me, I would say. But did I ask the next day when I went to the fire department, is everyone all right? Because maybe they came across a body, or maybe they had to save someone's life. And that's the way I always thought it was the right thing to say to the firefighters. But then did I ask them 2 days later how they were doing? Is everyone all right? Because my thing was physical. Okay, no one got hurt. Nothing collapsed on a firefighter. They didn't have smoke inhalation, but I never thought years ago of that mental health piece.
And I think that you bring up a very interesting point that I see regularly too, because I think you're absolutely right. What I've always noticed is that, people, again, it's not like in a movie, there's a collapse, there's a fatal vehicle accident where both police and fire show up can be very hard for a whole lot of guys, but they're not going to be like that ghost and that frozen face right away. It may come up a day or 2 or 3 or even a week later. And what I kind of remind people is that saying you're okay is also a very, think about the leading point of that question. Hey, are you okay? No, people will be like, oh, you want me to say I'm okay. Right? Because that's what we imply, right? And this is something that it's almost, sorry for pooping on both of your, the culture in both, but that's what we've always implied in the police and the fire, right? Hey, are you okay? You want the person to say yes, just so that it doesn't come up anything else. And that's part of what I was wondering about changing the culture a little bit, like being able to ask other questions. Hey, everything all right? Or do you want to talk about it or not? And then following up, like I tell people, it's not the first day, it's sometimes a week later that really fucks up the person. And I think that that's part of the changing of the culture, is to tell people, like, check in a little later on. Hey, everything okay? I think that the last time Brian was on, we talked about how, firefighters get to go to the station after a call and maybe sit around the table and have a coffee and talk about, hey, that was really fucked up or that was tough. Police get, all right, I'm leaving the scene. And then you go to the next call if there's another call, but you're alone again. I think that there's a lot to be said about following up regularly, and most people don't want that. And I don't know if you think I'm absolutely nuts as a mental health counselor, but truthfully, that's what I think is also missing is the culture in the police and fire departments.
Not to keep talking, Steve, did I ever tell you I don't know if I brought it on the show, around Christmas time, a 10-day-old baby passed away. Did I bring that up on the show by
I
chance?
don't recall. We may have had that private conversation, but I don't think it was here.
So I was the CO that night, which in our department, the lieutenant's usually the CO. They're inside. They're in charge of the shift. Then the senior sergeant is. So I was in this night because the lieutenant wasn't there, and we had a 10-day-old not breathing. The officers shot over there. It was early in the morning. So obviously we're doing our thing. So we got there just a little before the fire department, and the officers come into this 10-day-old. Firefighters get there, and we work together with them. And at that point, our transition is, I wasn't there, but we all saw what was going on, and the child probably wasn't going to make it, which the child didn't. But we had to set up one crime scene, sadly, because you can't just say a 10-day-old passed away. We set up the crime scene, and then we have to, once fire transports, we have to go to the hospital because that's, now the child's at the hospital. But it was almost, and I want to say this once again to leadership, and you don't need to have I say this all the time, you don't need to have stripes, stars, and bars, informal leadership. You don't need to be the CEO sitting on the desk. All these officers, like you said, Steve, now I got the house shut down. I got the officers guarding the child at the hospital, and then we got more calls going on. But at some point, you need to think as a leaders, I need to call these officers in one by one. I need to relieve the guy at the hospital. He doesn't need to go in the room and stand next to the deceased, but so we can take down that contact. But call your officers and call your firefighters. And I know you said firefighters, go back, and that's awesome. But call your officers back to the station. Hey, how you doing? Here's the deal. Cut the bullshit. Don't tell me fine. No one sees a 10-day-old deceased child and says, "Oh, I'm good." And there were some guys that were like, "Yeah, I'm good. Okay, whatever. Do your thing." There were some that I knew they weren't good, but someone else had to talk to them because they didn't want to talk to the sergeant. And then I had others that felt comfortable enough that said, "Hey, can I take like a half an hour? Hey, take as much time as you want." This is a good night because we had a lot of people on. But that's the one thing, call them. And if fire goes back and sits around the table and talks, that's awesome. But like you said, police are going to different calls. Slow down, call the officers in one at a time, sometime during the night, and see how they're doing. Do you need to go up to the gym? Do you need to go just to have a coffee? Do you need to sit around with us and, maybe in dispatch and talk a bit? So we're not just sitting in a car in a parking lot at 4 a.m. thinking about what you just saw. I just want to add that part.
Well, I think to touch upon what I said, Jay, is that we'll go back to the station after a call and we'll just kind of self-critique what you do right, what you do wrong, and it's harder for you guys because you got to go northeast, south, and west and back to your districts and do what you have to do. You guys, you probably do meet up in the middle at some point, but it's easier for us because our roles are a little bit different. So we're all going back to the same place where you guys are kind of going in separate directions. In a bigger city, you can't just zip across town in 2 seconds to go hang out. But I think the way that I found getting people to talk more is just, I don't come right at them and say, "Hey, tell me about that 10-week-old. It's a 10-day-old. I'll just be like, "Hey, were you northeast, south, or west tonight? Oh, geez, wow, it's a little bit. How long did it take you to get there?" And, oh, wow. And I'll come up with other stupid questions and just get them talking about that call. And the minute they start, "Hey, were you first on scene, second, third? Like, who's in charge? Is it you? Who's writing the report? Who's in shift commander?" And by the time, then all of a sudden it's like, "Okay, what time did you get to the call? How'd you do the call? What was your role?" And they're through it before they realize what's going on. And it's an informal way of doing a debriefing without me saying, "Okay, Jay, when I sit down, we're going to debrief you." You're like, "Fuck you. Like, I don't know." But I'm able to just kind of like, "Hey, you were the sergeant? You were inside? Like, what'd you do? How'd you do it? Who'd you talk to? And then you just get rolling, and some people just can't shut up once they get talking. And that's what's been successful for me. And that's how Tom Greenlaw from the police side of things, he taught me, and I took that to heart when he talked about that. And from the fire side, it's easier. What time do you get to shift? 7, 8? What you do roll calls, you do training, you do breakfast. Like, then all of a sudden you get that conversation going, and we just go through the day, and it just kind of, it's an informal way to do it, and it's just been successful for me. So I think it's, like I said, it's harder for the police. I don't know what you can do. You meet in the center for a half hour, you bring them all back for a half hour. I don't know, but I like your idea of giving them that. You need 30 minutes to go change your uniform, take a shower, whatever you got to do. Just that 30 minutes is not going to, end the world. It's going to actually make them a better officer when they get cleaned up and they feel refreshed and ready to go and feel like somebody actually cares.
Because I know what we talk about SISM, or I can't remember the other 4-letter acronym we used for that stuff, but sometimes those take a couple of days to get together and all that. And I know it still stigmatized a little bit, because I remember, I haven't done this in about, well, I want to say 8 years now, but I remember doing SISMs, and there was quite the stigma of whoever speaks up. You'd see the rest of the guys roll their eyes. And I don't know if that's still the case or not, but I wanted to throw that out too, because SISMs do exist. They can be beneficial. They got to be a lot faster than, unfortunately, what we can now with capacity sometimes. But I don't know if that's still the same with SISM. Has it changed? Has it evolved? Or what are your thoughts on that? And crisis intervention stress management, just so I tell all my audience what that means.
Yep.
Your turn to go first, Brian. You can't always defer to Jay, man.
He is senior to me on this podcast.
No.
So again, there's a couple things that happen with SISM that I don't like when you make it mandatory. I don't like that making anything mandatory, because people shut down. And I think when you do put everybody in a group without a little bit of like talking to people, you have to know your audience. I can't go to Framingham Police tomorrow and be like, all right, everybody line up, we're doing this, because who are you? You have to build a little bit of credibility. And maybe I kind of go in, I shoot the breeze a little bit and get to know people a little bit. And once you build that trust up a little bit, and the way the last SISM thing I was actually involved in, I showed up because people they need to see you there so that they'll talk. And it's my small town job that I work in. And people started talking. And once the quote unquote grizzly veterans start talking, and I'm the first to volunteer because I don't care, then other people will start talking. And slowly but surely we'll kind of work that in there. I've heard departments making a mandatory mental health class. You have to attend it, but you don't have to talk. And it's like, why put them in that spot? Because all you do is piss them off. Right. And the more we make things mandatory, the less people are going to want to do it. So I think there's better ways to go about it, and knowing your audience is key. Can I throw something in there? I don't know if the last time I talked to you or not, a friend of mine from fire department reached out to me and said, hey, I want you to come and add your 2 cents to this meeting they were having with the administration. Did I tell you about this last time?
You did not mention that. No.
So I showed up just thinking I was just going to add my 2 cents, and because, me, I like to throw my 2 cents out. And apparently I was the guest of honor and I didn't know it. So they brought the executive leadership from the police, the fire, the town administrators, and it was a lot of people there, and it was actually kind of nice. And I went through my story. They had the psychologist there that was riding in the cruises with them. And after that day, I got 2 phone calls, one from the red team, one from the blue team, saying we got somebody in crisis. And I was able to get them both placed. And I don't do follow-ups. I tend to leave people alone. I don't want to, if they want to tell me, great. But once I make that connection, I feel like I've done my part, and I kind of back off a little bit. But that was beneficial. And a lot of people responded well to it. The executive leadership understood, because they did mention EAP. And I'm like, who is EAP? I don't know who they are. Why am I going to tell a 22-year-old kid sitting behind the counter, doing their internship? I have no idea who they are. And it was received very well. So that we are slowly but surely getting through these. So hopefully that's the problem. I told them, you force anything on anybody, they're not going to respond well. So it is getting out there. So we are slowly but surely chipping away.
Yeah, and Brian brings up a great point. Brian's gonna get. I mean, I say this now because I know Brian, but Brian's gonna get me to talk. But I think sometimes with SISM, we don't. There's no black and white board that says, okay, death of a child, we got to get SISM there. Car accident, well, we'll see if we can get. It seems sometimes what I see, it's sometimes we have it, sometimes we don't. People will be like, hey, is there SISM coming in for this? No. And then 2 weeks later, something that maybe in my mind is lesser there's a system for that. But what happens is someone like Brian comes in, I'm going to talk. But what you see a lot, especially that I see on our end, police wise, is they shut down. They don't want to talk in front of anyone. But then 2 seconds later, if you're at the Elks of the VFW, the whole story's coming out in front of strangers. And I'm thinking, all right, so I know why it's happening, but like you sit there, it's like you just were in a room with guys and girls you work with. Didn't say a word. Obviously, something probably bothered you, but then once, and I'm not even saying the beer, the alcohol's flowing, but you're now at a bar and you're telling, I don't know if it's a war story or if it's, I do know it is, it's part of that person's therapy, but we're telling civilians or strangers on the street exactly what we should have said to people like Brian in that CISM meeting. And that's sometimes what I try and get across. I go, well, we're the first one to tell a story out of here, but when we've got the professionals or peer support people here, we're not talking about it.
The other part that I know a little bit about peer support, but how has that developed overall, the peer support? Because this is not something that's been around for 50 years, really, right?
Yeah, I'm Brian. If you want to talk about peer support, because we're still developing ours, police, in my opinion, are way behind on peer support, and the MPTC, which is the Massachusetts Police Training Council, last year was a big thing. Form peer support, had a lot of good classes on it, but we're still in police-wise infancy. So I want to defer to Brian.
So what all we are is we're that middle person, that person who right after that call. So something happens in Framingham tonight. Jay says, "Can you get down here? I'll be in my car in 5 minutes. I'm on the way to Framingham." And all I am is just that person to say, "Steve, how you doing? What's going on today?" And I'll do those. Hey, you started at 4. It's now midnight. What time are you supposed to? All those questions get you talking. I'm just that middle person who's just going to take the edge off you, release a little bit of that pressure that's going on inside your brain, just settle you down a little bit and say, "Listen, I've been there, done that." You know what I mean? It's no big deal. This is what it is. There's a lot of misconceptions about treatment, and I heard it recently. Well, I don't want to be tied to a bed. Well, you're not tied to a bed, and there's a lot of that misunderstanding of what's going on. And listen, I worked at the Department of Corrections for 5 years. I'm a firefighter paramedic. I've been around a little bit. When I went to McLean's, I was terrified. I thought I was going to be fighting for my food. I thought I was going to be stabbed because I'm wearing some uniform. Like, it couldn't have been any further from the truth. And there's a lot of those people just don't know that. So that's what my job is. It's just to kind of put that connection to the professionals, like what happened today. So somebody called me. I'm like, "Oh shit, this is what we got to do." I reach out to my network. I made a ton of phone calls. Things are hooked up. I step back. That's the peer support is. We're that middle person, that bridge to get you from holy shit, you're in crisis, because we could have, made decisions to call 911. Do we need to section? Do we need to go down and physically grab them and bring them out? And that's all we are. It's just that middle person, just that voice of reason, that person who's been there, seen a little things, and can just kind of say it's going to be all right. That's what the peer support is. It's just that bridge. I hope I explained that well enough, but in my head it sounds clear. But
No, I
No,
think that was
listen.
very clear.
And to what Brian says one thing, and to hear you saying being in uniform, am I going to fight over food? That's such a I think that's maybe how I would think. And I wish more people would come forward. And obviously it takes a lot, but people have gone to McLean's, people have gone to On-Site. Anyone that's ever come up to me and said that was, "Jay, it's the best thing ever." And some people who I would never have expected or never knew, because it's none of my business, have said, "Oh my God, Jay, you just brought up this in this PowerPoint, going to McLean's or going to the On-Site Academy or going wherever. And the best thing, Jay." I'm like, "Oh, I'm glad." And I don't want to be like, almost discarded, but it's people that have come up to me. I'm like, "Wow, okay, I never knew you went there." First of all, thanks for sharing that with me, and second of all, that's awesome. But tell more people, because I know that if I had to go to McLean's, what you just said, Brian, is absolutely 100% right, because of movies we've seen, because of TV shows we've seen over the years, and we're all the same age. It was the stigma of seeing things. I don't want to say One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or stuff like that, but what we saw growing up was, you're going to be in a room, there's going to be a TV, you're going to be in a white coat, people are going to treat you bad. And I think that's something that people like yourself, Brian, you just said it perfectly. I wasn't fighting over food. No one was hurting me. That's huge.
it was the single-handedly the best thing I ever did. And in a nutshell, my background is wife, 4 kids, married 28 years, and I didn't want to lose what I have. I don't have addiction problems. I'm not a big drinker. I'm not I don't use the drugs. Even though that we could do a whole nother podcast on why we can't do gummies, but I can drink 17 beers and 18 shots of whiskey before going into my shift tomorrow. That's cool, but just don't do a gummy, then go get a good night's sleep. That's horrible.
I just had that conversation in Washington State at a conference.
Jeez, that's it. I'm kind of getting on that bandwagon with the whole, there's other ways. So we got to come up with other ways and having people get hammered at bars, and drinking themselves silly before they go home and cause more problems.
Well, go ahead, Jay.
No, one thing, like you brought that up, conversation I had with one of my, I hate saying an officer the other day. No, he's a friend of mine. Was that his big thing? He said, I'm glad I'm older. I said, why's that? He goes, because if I was 25 years old, I'd be drinking myself to death right now. And I'm like, all right, well, I don't know how to totally explain that, but part of it was I have a family, I have kids. And I think that was in the back of his mind, but how do we get to that 25-year-old though? That's the other thing. Cause that was what some people have said to me. And this person, my friend, this officer said to me, if I was 20 years ago, I'd be drinking myself to death. So.
Right. Well, I'm just going to tell you as a therapist, when someone says, the drinking stuff, I'm like, oh, so you're not using Prozac, you're using Budweiser. Okay. That's a good antidepressant, except it's a depressant, but that's okay. Go ahead. And so, I joke around about that, but it's kind of make a point of, so you're dealing with it in a different way. You're just self-medicating in a way that's socially appropriate. But God forbid any of you guys take a freaking gummy, because I'm going to lose my shit if you take a gummy. But point being is that I think that it's important to break down a few things, because I think that you're right. Everyone expecting Nurse Ratched at McLean's at On Site down in Maryland or a couple of other places that I know of. And like, no, I've never seen Nurse Ratched. I've actually seen Nurse Ratched more at the ER. Sorry, my ER nurses, than I've seen in an inpatient setting, just saying. But I think that that's the two things I want to mention, because the self-medication is something that happens a whole lot, because like you said, I can have 12 beers before my shift and that's fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. But ultimately that's the same shit as taking a Prozac, if you really think about it. So I think that what maybe we can shift a little bit is the one thing that's frustrating for me too, is as a therapist, people expect me, and if this has happened more frequently than I care to say, they come in like, so you're going to analyze me? I'm just going to ask you questions. You want to talk, you talk. You don't want to talk, I don't give a crap. You just do what you need to do. But I'm assuming you're here for help. So, the more you tell me the truth, the more it helps you. But I think that there's also some misconceptions about mental health and going to see a therapist. Do you think that plays a factor also? Because as much as I love McLean's On Site, I think that we also skip sometimes because we wait till it's too far ahead. How about we get to where mental health can be approachable on a mental health counselor basis?
I got a lot to say on this one. Jay, you better go first on this one.
No, it's all you, man. Go ahead.
Do you guys want me to go for a coffee, or should I be hearing this?
Here's deep breath. Here's why I think I get through to people, because my story is my story. My story is no different than anyone else. And I don't try to preach woe's me, because we all have a story. Where I think I'm finding my success is that we don't tell our spouses what's going on. We don't tell them what's going on. So my wife, she talks, not a bad thing, but she likes to talk. And when I come through the door after doing a shitty call, I don't want to hear 75 different things. I need time to process and get my head right. And it took a little bit of time, but now she leaves me alone. I come right to the room, I set my stuff down, I do what I got to do, I relax. And when I'm ready to socialize, I'll go out. We don't tell our spouses what's going on. And I hear it all the time. My wife sucks. She doesn't get it. My husband sucks. He doesn't get it. Well, if you explain what's going on, well, no, they won't get it. Well, of course, they're not going to get it if you're not explaining. You have to explain what's going on. You have to explain how you're feeling. And unfortunately, there are spouses who are like, well, I work in this field and that's more important. And they don't understand what we do. And that creates some issues. But I think the more we explain to our families, the more we explain to our significant others that we love and care about, that this is what's going on in my head. I can't process a dead child. I can't do it. And when I had my breakdown, I couldn't process it. Like I was on my hands and knees, bawling my eyes out of the hospital, like thinking a 2-year-old child's, the worst thing I've ever seen. And it doesn't get easier. And I can tell you this: all the worst calls of my career, I've processed them all except for the 2-year-old girl that broke me, and that was 8 years ago. I just can't get through that one call. But I will tell my wife when I do a shitty call, text her, I'll call, I'll be like, and she knows I got the group coming up, and she knows I have resources, and she'll hound me, and she'll know when things aren't quite right, and I'll be like, I'm fine, I know who to talk to. I'll reach out to people because I don't want to burden her with it because I have resources, and we have to be better about telling them what's going on so that they know you're not being an asshole when you walk through the door. I just need to. How do you process a near dead 2-year-old kid? Like, how do you process that? How do you process a 10-day-old baby? I don't know. I don't know the answer. If I did, I'd be a lot richer and I wouldn't be sitting where I am right now. I'd be in a tropical island somewhere. I don't have the answers, but you just have to let me work through it. And I find, video games is a thing for me, and camping life is how I process my stuff. So we have to get better at telling our loved ones, telling our kids what's going on, so that they know that they don't take it personally when we're having a day and we just are lost in our own little brains. So,
Well,
No, no, I agree. And I never was part of that thought process. I'm still only about 75% there, but how do I say this? I'm 100% exactly what you said, Brian. I agree with you. I'm only about 75% there. But I wasn't until I heard Dave Augusta, who was a Lawrence cop. He did part of our insert. Well, he did a video about his life and growing up in Lawrence. I knew him, actually, his dad too. When I was a little kid, they were Lawrence cops, and Dave says a similar thing. How do you expect your significant other to understand if you're not talking to them? And you don't have to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, you don't have to tell them every single detail,
I
but
don't.
what you dealt with. Sometimes I sit there and listen to the news or watch the news and some horrific things that I know that I would have trouble with. Just the other day in Ohio, and a trigger warning for anyone who's listening, but just the other day in Ohio, the father who hunted his 4, 6, and 8-year-old, yeah, I'll say it. We have a group text between about 4 of us, and we were talking 4 police officers. How we would have dealt with that arriving. I think the professionalism of the 2 officers, if you haven't seen it, the professionalism of the 2 officers, when that black box sitting there, that the public can't see, are those 3 dead children. And the father's just sitting there and hearing the details. Okay, great. Well, what happens from there? Those officers already took the father into custody and saw those children. Who comes next? Well, they don't mysteriously disappear, the bodies. They don't get moved right away. No, the fire department's coming. The paramedics are coming. Everyone's seeing this happen. And the reason I bring this up is you don't run into your house and say, well, guess what? This happened, blah, 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 in detail. But do explain, hey, listen, I was on this call today, and the father, however you can explain it, whatever the threshold limit of your significant other is. And like I said, Brian's light years ahead of me with saying things, but you don't have to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, you don't have to go into too much detail, but give the basis of what you dealt with that day.
So we had a code. I would text her to check on the kids, and she would have to let me know that each of them were breathing and alive and snoring, sleeping, whatever they were doing. And I would just get the oh no text back, okay, and then 5 minutes later they're all good, and I would know. And what she was doing is she was Googling Stoughton's. We're in the news a lot, so she would Google, and same thing with Framingham. You guys are in the news a lot, so they'll Google and they'll see what you're going to, but I don't give details. I just say check on the kids, and she'll know. And you go in a group, yep, go in a group, we're talking, and we're good. So,
yeah. And that's another thing you brought up group. I can't throw a shameless plug out there, but I have a friend that works for a hospital that does first responder groups, and also for veterans. And we tried to hook someone up, and it was like, it's a balance. The person would benefit and understood they would benefit from a group. But then, well, it's 3 days a week. Jay, I can't do 3 days a week. I could do outpatient once a week, maybe. And that's something that always got me. It's like, what would happen if I was in that position? If I definitely needed to go, do I make time? It was talking to my spouse enough. Do I, you know, do I need to go 3 days a week? So when also I'm just thinking this when you bring up groups, you know, as someone who's been through it, Brian, what's your thought process when someone, like, I try and point someone towards a thing that's 9 to 1, 3 days a week, but then I get the J or whatever. I can't do it 3 days. What's your thoughts on that?
So, and I tell people again, I'm a little bit more, depending on who they are, I'm a little bit more blunt. And so you're going to lose your wife, you're going to lose your kids most likely, and you're going to lose your career. If I send you away for 30 days to a place down in Florida? I believe you know Sunny as well, right? So if I send you down to Sunny for 30 days, it's 30 days of your career, which is your academy was 6 months, your in service is a week. It's not a lot of time at the end of the day when it looks at it. So if you don't go, you're going to wind up paying child support, alimony, whatever else in Massachusetts. They're not very kind to you. Your career is going to be over. And then what? How do you go from a cop making 150 to 200 grand a year with details in Mass, which is very lucrative for those that, to making what, 60 grand? What, doing what? Like campus security somewhere? Like, I don't, where do you go from that? So I think when you look at 30 days as opposed to the rest of your life, it's something that people have to look at. And that's one thing I try to explain to people. You are literally going to lose everything. And what saved me is that I threw myself at the mercy of McLean's and said, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But I'm not just going to not fight for my life. You know what I mean? So, and there's people who have just up and left. Fire departments just never showed up again. They're in other states doing methadone and living homeless. Lost their wife. Kids will never talk to them again for a drug that could care less about you. So these are some of the things that we have to. These are some of the things we have to correct sooner rather than later.
So blunt works.
Yes.
I mean, I just I think you need to read the room. I think you need to read your audience and know. Somebody who I don't know, I've had to tiptoe around, and there's other people who I'm like, it's just gonna fly. And I've had screaming matches with people, but I knew I could have that with them. And there's other people who I've just had to kind of tiptoe around. But I think once I get my clutches on people and I kind of know and I get a read for them, I kind of know where to go. And I'm not afraid to throw out. You're going to lose everything. Your marriage will end. You'll lose your career. Start planning another career. I don't know what to tell you, but it's going to go away if you get terminated. So blunt. What's your choice? If you don't like what I'm saying, then stop what you're doing. I don't know what else to tell you, but you're gonna lose it all over things that are very correctable.
You know, I said blunt and I wanted to take it back right away because I think what you're talking about is honesty. And I think that for me, when I do as a counselor, when people come in, I always say, like, if you don't want an honest therapist, that's fine. I can BS you all you want. I can ask you about your feelings and say, how's everything going today? Or I can be the guy who goes and tells you, like, look, you got to work on this. You got to set some proper boundaries with everyone else. You got to start talking to other people because you know what? I've been around you guys, but I don't know everything, and I'll never claim I know everything. But use your resources. Use your, you talked about going fishing, or going hiking, or going whatever. I mean, the other thing that I tell guys is that like, okay, come to me, come to someone at your department. But at the end of the day, what are you doing to take care of you? Because that's the other part too that ends careers pretty easily. Because if you're all consumed by fire or police, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, your life then becomes nothing, especially when you get closer to retirement, or if you're so consumed that you don't have an outside life that it eats you alive. And I don't know if that plays a factor too, but I just want to throw that out too, because I really feel guys forget about that stuff.
And Brian, I'm sure will echo this because I'm sure it's the same in the fire service because I'm just sure it is. But if I make it to 55 years old, trust me, I got the clock counting down. I have 8 years, 7 months left. 5 years after that, no one's going to give. First of all, no one's going to know who I am. All right. If I live my entire life being a police officer, which I love, and I did it for years, living just, I'm a cop, I'm a cop, I'm a cop. I call my previous department now and hey, what's going on? It's J-Ball for PD, blah, blah, blah. Who's this? I've been gone 10 years. There's a handful of people left there. I don't exist. If you live your life to be a police officer, rude awakening to some of the younger guys, because I know some of the older guys, and I hope the older guys understand this. The day you leave, the day you retire, people remember you. They'll tell funny stories about you. But as like our department, 60%, I want to say around 5 years or less. Once that goes, there's people's names we bring up jokingly, and some of the older guys will bring up them, the guys that are retired, and the stares. Oh, he sounds like a funny guy. Guess what? If you live your life as a police officer the entire career, and that's all you have, once you leave, people aren't going to remember you. You're going to show up for that police Memorial Sunday, and people are like, who's that guy? Oh, that's Jay Ball. Who's Jay Ball here? Oh, Jay Ball is here from such and such and such and such. Oh, okay, whatever, man. Have something outside policing, fire. And Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, saving fire service.
I got 2 years left, and you know, it's one thing to like have pride in what you do, but to live it, to make it your whole life. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I do other things. You know what I mean? I don't want to be just known. I don't want to walk out the door and then die 6 months later. You hear these cops who work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. They've got $1 million in the bank. They've got big fancy trucks and the big fancy house that they never get to use. They never get to see. They never travel because, oh, we got details. It could be a detail. I don't live an extravagant life, but I'll tell you what, I'm pretty relaxed and pretty comfortable in where I am. And my PTSD has gotten better the more I travel, the more I do other things. We don't need to live our lives 24/7 around the job. And there's other things to do. Fishing, you mentioned the fishing, the hiking, the camping, do other things. For the love of God, there's life outside of this. And there's so many books on life after the badge and all these other options. There's other things to do out there that this does not need to consume you. There's a story of a New York City police sergeant who did 40 years in the job, 40 in New York City, like insane
That's
amount.
140 anywhere else.
Right?
Jesus Christ.
Right? Like, and yet the day he retired, not exactly, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but pretty much like the day he was high fiving everybody walking out the door, he dropped dead. Didn't enjoy a single minute of retirement. And you see these guys that hang on, they hang on, they hang on. They're 40 years in the job because they have nothing else.
Yeah.
There has to be something else. You have to take time for yourself and self care and whether it be meditation and yoga and all these other things that people need to be aware of and people need to learn about. And we're slowly but surely spreading the word that there's other options other than therapy. And I got a great meeting coming up with the Department of Public Health representative soon. We've got the event that I'm doing in October that hopefully is going to save the world. If you ask me, I'll tell you, we're going to save the world. At least that's the goal. I'm going to let people know that there's life outside of the job and there's therapy outside of just sitting there talking to somebody if you're uncomfortable. That there's the meditation, the yogas are saving the world, and it doesn't take a lot of time to do it.
And I want to say something on that. My guy from the VA, he's been hitting me over the head with yoga, and I'm almost embarrassed every time I go see him. And I say, nope, haven't done it yet. Nope, haven't done it yet. And that's part on my side, my fault. I wish I do it, and that's something that I haven't got into yet. But I want to say that I believe everything you just said, Brian, is dead on. But it's just something, and I'm trying to appeal to the others out there that haven't. That say, oh my God, yoga, I'm not doing freaking yoga. I've had it sold to me a million different ways. Hey, Jay, 10 o'clock on Sunday, come with me. There's a lot of sightseeing to do. And people are trying to sell it to me. I just haven't bought in yet. And that's personally with me. So I hope that if anyone ever just heard Brian say that and I was, oh, fucking yoga. Yeah, I was like that. And I'm slowly but surely trying to get to it. I've actually had a conversation with my wife going, I need to do this. I just haven't yet. And somewhere I need to jump over the fence and say, okay, it's time to do it. But I 100% believe in what you just said. You know, the meditation, the yoga, everything you just said is it's you know, it takes a while. I'm still not there, but I'm invested in exactly what we've been talking about.
And I think that I just before you go ahead, Brian, but I just want to mention that I've had guys when I asked them about what they do outside of work and they look blankly at me. I'm like, go take a class on underwater basket weaving. I don't really give a crap what you do, but you got to get out of your job. And that's not just for first responders, any job. But I'll speak with first responders. That's 80% of my conversation sometimes. I'm like, I'm not sufficient. I can't be the guy you always dump on. And that's not because I don't think I can handle it. It's the fact that I can't be that thing. You need to have like gardening. You got to have You talked about all these things. Go be active in your community, go volunteer to yo-yo. I mean, I really don't care what people do, but ultimately that I want to throw that out because I feel like first responders in particular, they get in love with the job, but they forget that they have a life outside of it.
I do not spend 1 minute. I don't watch the news. I don't follow anything. I don't listen to the scanner. The only time I do is just because I'm the union president. So if something big happens, I kind of need to know about it. Other than that, unless something bad is happening with the guys at work or the girls at work, I don't care. I don't care. There's a 5 alarm fire in Springfield right now. As long as nobody died, nobody get hurt, I don't care. It's not my problem. I keep in my own lane. I got enough of my own problems. And that's what allows me to keep my mind fresh and clear because I do take on a lot of other people's problems, as do you. And we've discussed this before. It's a lot. And people get worried about me saying, you listen to all this other stuff, but I dump my stuff too every now and then, and I get it out there. And we have to find other things to do other than listen to scanners all day and listening to death, destruction, and mayhem. I don't care what's happening in the town next to me. I don't unless it involves me or my family. I focus on myself right now because that's I got to take care of me so I can take care of my family. Then continue doing what I'm doing, trying to help other people.
I'll be as soon as we're done with here, I'll go check on my kids, but I'm gonna go play in my garden and I weed it and I take the rocks out. And people are like, why do you spend time doing that? Because I just don't need to think. I just I like not thinking. I love not thinking. And for meditation, I can go on and on. I'm just gonna say this quickly. Meditation is not what most people think. You can meditate by drinking water, by walking, by working on the garden. It doesn't have to be aum. Aum is helpful. Don't get me wrong, but we got to also break those barriers. And I think that that's what I'm happy to hear about that in October that it's happening. Because last time we spoke, you were working on it. We didn't really have a date or anything else. So I just was wondering if you have anything on that.
October 30th, it's going to be at a hotel in Leominster. I will send the official details out. We're in the process of signing a contract. We're going to have federal agencies involved, state agencies, PFFM. I'm going to send it out to every police and fire department, union, to pretty much anybody I can send it out to. And we're going to advertise it well. We've got a lot of support from some charities, nonprofits, and we're hoping this to be the success. We outgrew the one we're going to do in April. We outgrew it in days, and which was a nice problem to have. And we're hoping to get between 200 and 300 people. We're hoping to have 20 to 25 different vendors. I'm going to invite anybody and everybody that wants to attend, and family and spouses are welcome, and significant others, whoever your support network is. And we're going to have service dogs there, and we're going to teach people about what's out there for resources. And I'm not going to be in shackles at your facility, and these people will be there to say, no, you're not going to do that. This is what we're going to do. And there's going to be people that are going to do massage, there's going to be people who do yoga, there's going to be people who do meditation, all these other natural, holistic approaches that I'm a huge fan of. And 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I was not. I would have made fun of you, but now I'm a huge believer of the natural, holistic approach as opposed to medication. And, I'm hoping that we can take this on the road because we have interest from other states. You know that Wisconsin, where they had the riots during the last couple of years. One of the people that's going to be a speaker at my event, she is a firefighter out there, and they do not have peer support. They have nothing. If something bad happens, they call in the city of Chicago peer support. I mean, that is insane to me. So these people just went out home after the riots. Yeah, go do whatever. Don't bother us. And so we're going to take hopefully these conferences on the road and try to spread the word throughout the other states. So we'll send all that out to everybody and anybody that'll listen to it.
Awesome.
Soon.
Well, you can count on me, Brian, to be there. And as a Reiki practitioner, people always
We
laugh,
need
but
you. Yep.
I'll tell people I'll go to my grave saying there's a police officer and a firefighter that both got on my table, freaked out because of how it worked. So I'm like, I've done my job in life. I've convinced a few people. But as the hour approaches, I just want to thank you guys again for this time. It's just very, very helpful. I think we need to do this again because I didn't get to half those questions. And anything else you want to kind of like talk about? I know last time, Brian, you also gave out your email and all that.
So I will give out my phone number is 774-766-0852. It's on 24/7. If I don't know you and you text me, just kind of give me a heads up just so I don't just ignore it. And my email is just my name, B Harkins, HARKINS 2814 @gmail. Any resources I can provide for people, I will certainly do my best.
I'll put that in the show notes for sure, Brian. Jay, anything to add?
No, you can put the info like you've done before in the show notes. That's fine, and I'm glad. I do want to say it's weird. I do talk a lot, and I meet a lot of people, and people say that. But someone like Brian alluded to, someone that I've known from my previous department, reached out to me one day. Had no idea what I was doing, because we lost touch over 10, 11 years. And then hooked me up with Brian, and it's been a pleasure knowing Brian. So it's pretty cool how those things happen. You lose touch with someone for 10, 11 years that you've worked with as a close town, and then they say, well, geez, you should talk to this guy. And there's Brian. So
Here we are.
yeah.
Well, I want to thank both of you. I definitely want to have you back on, number one. But number two, just personally, thank you, because, you know, I always feel privileged being in these conversations. I particularly like the last half hour where you guys were talking. I was just like putting in a few words and you guys were talking. Because to me, I don't take what you say lightly, and I truly appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome.